The following presentation was recorded live for the 18th Annual Convention of CALLERLAB. We take you live to the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada, where our session is just getting underway.
Take a seat. We're going to start this session, the business side of calling. Our panelist will be Tim Marriner. Tim is originally from Maine, has lived in Norfolk since 1964, and started calling in November of '75. Tim has a BA in communication with emphasis on speech. He was branch manager of the First Virginia Bank, but became a full-time caller in 1987. He records on Rhythm Records, has traveled throughout the United States and abroad, is an active member of CALLERLAB and co-chairman of the Foundation Fundraising Committee. Our next panelist is Larry Letson. Larry is a full-time caller, has been calling 24 years, is a CALLERLAB board of director, and records on Royal Records. He and his wife Vicki run a printing business in McAllen, Texas. Larry also owns his own marketing company and has one son. Our next one is Gregg Anderson. Gregg is from Colorado Springs, Colorado, member of CALLERLAB since 1975, presently serving on the Board of Governors, has a bachelor's degree in accounting, and has presented color slide presentations on bookkeeping and taxes at many of the prior CALLERLAB conventions. Please give them a welcome.
Good morning. Welcome to Baghdad Theater. They're all open air theaters now, I think they have over there. Anyway, I thought this session was choreographic applications. I have all these get-ups and sit-ups and get-outs. And, well, I guess I don't need those, do I? Well, anyway, the whole idea is let's get organized. So, our topic of direction this morning is the business side of calling. And first of all, we have to take a look at what we're doing here. Is this a hobby, or is this a business or a job that we're doing? And my question is, if this is a hobby, why are you here? You know, a hobby, according to Webster, is a favorite pursuit, an activity or an interest, something engaged for pleasure. It's a pastime. As far as business is concerned, business is a work or trade, something which a person is engaged. I'm single, so therefore I don't work. Right, engaged. Got it. Anyway, if this is an activity that's just a hobby, then I would have to say, well, I think it's probably more of a business that we're working at here because of the time and effort that we're taking to pursue what we're doing. You're here at a convention, and that's just another reason why I feel that you're in a learning mode of educating yourself and developing your skills, and I would then think that this is more of a business application that we're working in. We definitely are making money. We're devoting a lot of time in working and keeping books and records, receipts, and we have accurate records we try to keep for profit, loss, statements, and things of that nature. So if this is a business, then you as callers are the product. We develop a product, we take training, education, and skills, and we try to improve the product. We endorse a product. We're memberships of CALLERLABs, your local callers associations. We're licensed, and also we market a product. We try to get out there, work, and sell yourself. We try to do the best job that we can in order to pursue this market. And they say that the old vantage square dancing is you in the middle of it. It's fun with you in the middle of it. I would also go on to say that you can't have success without you. It's the same idea. You are also the manager. We're all multi-level managers. We are planners, controllers, and directors. planners in so much that we set goals. We have long-term goals and objectives, short-term goals, and we actually try to figure ways to measure these goals. We're controllers. We keep a lot of research and developing in what we're doing, calling-wise. We try to develop improvements in our skills and calling. And directors, because we actually get things in motion. We go out there and we do the dances. We're in action. How well you manage yourself will reflect in the amount of success you have in your business. And success, I would say, through organization, if we were to measure organization, I would say organization would be inversely proportional to the numbers of piles of paperwork that we create in an office at a time. In your office, we have, first of all, mailings that come in. And the idea here is to reduce the number of piles that we create and try to get organized. And I came up with a system that I use when we're dealing with these piles called TARF, T-A-R-F. T standing for trash, A standing for act, R standing for refer, and F standing for file. Whenever we get a bunch of mail that comes in, that's the first thing I think of. Oh, this is trash. We don't need that. You know, this is stuff that doesn't pertain to anything that I need right now. Let's just throw that away. It's gone. History. Act. Something that you know somebody has asked for a resume, somebody's asked for a picture or something. You sit on it, you act it right now. You take care of it. It's gone. And now that pile is taken care of. The referral pile of goods that come in with mail, primarily you'll take those and you'll set those aside and come back to them periodically to clean them up, get that pile away. File, all the information that comes in through directions and all that sort of good stuff. You might want to keep that, note services and things of that nature, so you'll develop a file system and put them in a filing cabinets. And most offices, so to speak, you should have a filing cabinet or something that you can take care of all that information. Keep track of it. Label the files so that you can go through them in a fashion and know that everything in this one segment here is of that pertaining of that subject. If you use that TARF system, I think you'll reduce the number of piles that you have in your office and actually organize yourself even better. In the office, we have a lot of phone calls that come in. Working as square dance callers, you have periodically you're away, and you ought to have an answering machine in your office because incoming calls could be business. And you really need to get out there and reach all of that business as possible, and then take those calls down, write a list of them that when you get in, and call those folks back. If you get a system where you don't have answers, or if you're on another answering machine, keep that call on that list there until you can scratch it off. I myself will organize myself in the first thing I do in the day, and we'll make out a list of things to do. And that's great unless you just keep making lists of things to do. And you find up that you just have list upon list. So the first thing I put on the top of my list is to get rid of all other lists of things to do. Anyway, so if you keep that list of things to do in your desk or office, in your office space, mark them off, scratch them off. If you physically scratch something off on the list, you feel like, well, I've accomplished something. You don't forget that you really did it. And you really will feel that you have achieved something that day when you look at the end of the list and it's all scratched up. Work for tomorrow. Start all over again. Things to do. Another thing that we have that as callers we have to really organize a lot is, well, there are our calendars. We get a phone call or something in the mail asking for dates that we have available, and we have to have an organized calendar to be able to open up right there at the phone, or when you're on the road, open right up and say, that date's available. No, this date is not available. I can't do it then, but I can do it next year. So they'll come back and ask you for maybe next time. I have a system with my calendar where if it's somebody just inquiring or they want me to hold a date, I'll take my pencil and I'll just pencil it in. As soon as I get a contract in the mail for that particular event, then I'll take a pen and I'll pen it in the calendar, and I'll highlight it that I've returned all that information back to them. So I can flip through the calendar, everything that's highlighted, all the days that are highlighted in yellow, I know that I have contracts for, and I've returned mail about, and we're set to do that dance. Before I go into a dance, or before I go just out and do all these dances, I'll put out an itinerary. And I know that several callers are putting out itineraries now. I know Larry has an itinerary, and I have itineraries you keep track of at home. Everyone likes to know where you're at. And if you're on the road a lot, people can follow you. If you make an itinerary up, it's another way of people to say, hey, I've got a cousin or somebody that lives in that area. I just might show up there and go out. Sometimes they'll just show up there without telling you. And itineraries are really important to cross business. We like to always cross-reference, cross-sell things. I think with an itinerary you can cross-sell your dances because people see all of them in front of you and they think, I can attend this one and then go to here too and show up at this one here, and boy, we're going to have fun. Won't we just fool him? Well, they've shown up, and that's great. And if you're working on a percentage, that's even better. So itinerary is important, and it also organizes yourself because you have contacted those dancers or the organizations that have hired you 6 months or 3 months or however old or long your itinerary is going to be, and confirmed that that date or the hall or all the information has not changed, so that you don't have any problems where you show up and the hall or location's been changed, or maybe the event or the date was incorrect. You've confirmed it ahead of time, you've printed it in an itinerary, and you've mailed it out to those clubs. They get it. If there's anything wrong, they'll contact you. You've solved a problem before it's even occurred. Things happen, and things can be mismanaged, and we can get, every once in a while, a double booking. And we try to organize ourselves to the point where we don't have that occur at all, if possible. And a way to maintain that would be through that calendar and using that sort of technique. I know we probably all have techniques, and we'll open up to questions here in a minute. And maybe some others will have other ways of doing it. This is just a system that I use, and I found it to be effective. There are times where things can occur. What if you lose a calendar that you've been taking with you everywhere you're going? There's no problem because you work off of contracts. You go back through the contracts and you can rebuild that calendar again. The dates that are in pencil, they're supposed to call you anyway to reconfirm it further down the line, and it's not a firm date, so you're all set. That happened to me one time where I had a full calendar and I carry it with me everywhere I went, but I had a nice binder. Boy, it was a great looking binder. And one evening I left it in the hall as we were packing up. People help you pack things up and put it in the car, and that binder was not there when I got back. Calendar is of no use for most people, but the binder was good. So some advice would be not to put a calendar in a good-looking binder when you're out. But anyway, the idea is keep track of that calendar. Take the calendar with you everywhere you go, and keep one calendar. If you have two calendars, you have problems where you can, some person will call, somebody at home, and they'll say, yeah, that's available, you're on the road, and give it to someone else. And you come back home and you haven't cross-referenced the calendars, and all of a sudden you have problems. Keep one calendar is a suggestion that I would have for you. And as I mentioned before, things happen, and the best way to deal with them is to be honest about it and say, hey, look, I fouled up, I had this, I thought I had that, and these people contacted me first, so we're going to have to go with that date. If I can help you further down the line, let me know. All right, with the calendar in the office area, we have, I have a map that I hang on a wall. When people call in, they want to know if I can get to such and such a place from such and such a time. I check to see if I can get from point A to point B before I say, yeah, I'll do it. So often you just want to go, hey, they call me, yeah, let's do the dance. And you wind up, you're in a third time zone and you can't make it. Or maybe it's something else scheduled and you just can't get to it. So having a map on the wall helps locate the places where you're going to be going, point A, point B. And I think it's another way of just organizing your office and yourself. When you're on the road, if you're traveling from, let's just say you have a Saturday where you're traveling maybe a few hours away down the road, or maybe you're calling in a full-time field and you're traveling for a week or 2 weeks on a road. There's things that you can carry with you that would make your travel a lot easier. First of all, before you travel, you always have your AAA agents. I don't know if any of you all use any of the AAA programs. I use them a lot. They give you the triptychs and maps, and you can always just flip through them and you know you're progressing when you're traveling somewhere. Also, if you're flying somewhere, let's just say to a convention or whatnot, we have travel agents, and they do a lot of good work for you. You don't have to sit there and do all the work yourself. It takes a lot of training. You have to train a travel agent to your business. They really don't know what you do. You have to explain to have morning workshops or have afternoon sessions. They just want to get you to point A and B. They don't realize that you have to get there maybe 2 hours before time, get something to eat, relax, do the dance or function, and then come home, say the next day. If you get a good travel agent on your side that can help you out and call you up, what a big plus that is. So if you're doing a lot of traveling, conventions even, I would say try to contact a travel agent and do some work. They also have computer programs, Prodigy and things of that nature that you can sign up for. If you are into doing that sort of work yourself, you can get on the computer, tap right online to their agents, and all of a sudden you have all the airline information in front of you. You can shop for an airline ticket that way. But if you don't know all the travel codes and don't want to learn how to be a travel agent, let someone else do it. That's what they're paid to do anyway. I just soon myself. The other thing as far as traveling, when you carry along, you want to carry along your contracts, all the information that had sent you. You want to make sure you get to the dance location on time, and that when they finally give you a check of some form, you look at it and say, hey, yeah, that's right, everything's good, we're all set. If there's any problem, you can just pull the contract out right then. You don't have to say, when I get home, I'll square it away and get back to you. Flyers for the dance. If you have a flyer on the dance, take that with you, because you can always verify the location as you travel. Should you get lost, you just flip over to a gas station or somewhere and say, hey, look, can you direct me over to such and such a place, hall, and that'll help you out there. A lot of time, contact numbers are great, but if it's half hour or so before the dance, they're already there. They've decorated, and you're calling nobody. So it's a good thing if you do have a contact number. Maybe you should have a hall contact number as well that you can direct. If you should get lost, you can call the hall directly, and then they'll guide you to the location where you need to be. Also, when you're traveling, I keep a logbook in my car where I write down all the mileage that I've put in, and all on my car, and all the gas, oil, anything pertaining to the car, I'll keep in this logbook. And the main reason for keeping that would be at the end of the year, you can just tally up all the miles you've driven, all the miles pertaining your business, and you can also tally up gas, oil, repairs, and all of that. As Greg will get into here, a lot of it, you can actually deduct a percentage of it due to your business. The other thing would be, just for your personal records, you go sell that car. If you show somebody a logbook of that car, they'll be impressed and know how you've taken care of the car. And it might just be the selling point when you try to trade in that vehicle later down the line. So I keep logbooks with me and write all the information down in them. Another thing would be that you can travel along with you while you're traveling, that you can take with you, rather, would be an address book of people that you need to contact. Not just your club contacts, but I mean, if for some reason or another you need to contact another caller or emergency purposes, something happens, you have that in front of you, and you don't have to rely on information or anything like that. You can just take your business along with you. Always take along credit cards that you use. Have one credit card that you use for your business, and that way you know that percentage of that you can deduct off of it at the end of the year, tax time, which is all important. Checkbooks, if you have one checkbook or checking account for your business only, you can go right through and deduct all the items that pertain to your business right off. You know that the amount that you have taken in and dished out, everything, all the information from that account is about business. And that's good to know when it comes again at tax time at the end of the year, and you don't have to have your personal information taken out of that as well. Frequent flyer cards or frequent hotel stayer cards, you have to take those things with you. I actually have it's a business card file where you can put all those in. Carry them in your car, or if you're going somewhere, you can put them in a briefcase and just flip through them, and you need to get in contact with your travel agent, there it is. There's the number for it. Or hotel stay or accommodations further down the line. You can just open it right up, and there it is. Organizing yourself is the main key here, what we're trying to get at. As far as there were some questionnaires that were brought in and asking about prices, how do you work your business and how do you set your prices? Again, like any product, it's a supply and demand. You have to actually look at the market that you're going to be working in, and you being the product, try to figure out if the area there is bearish or bullish towards you, so to speak. It's really a trial and error. If it's the first time into an area, maybe you won't charge quite as much. If you've been in there quite a few times and had some big crowds, maybe you will go up on a price a little bit on it. But pricing is your own value, a sense of worth. It's what you think you can get out of a market. I don't think there's any stronghold or everybody, it's not a price fixed thing where every time you're in this market, everybody should be charging that amount. It's really a sense of worth, what you think you can get out of the market at that time. And the times of the years that you go into a particular area to do some calling will also reflect the amount that you'll have to charge into that. Most callers, I say most, there's a lot of callers that will set for a set price and work on a percentage, and there are advantages to it and there are disadvantages to all of that. So again, it's what you think you can, what your value is or sense of worth in that particular market. Supply and demand. You got a formula for that?
Yeah. I have a formula for pricing, and I didn't create it. Max Forsythe gave it to me years ago. He said if your calendar's full, you're too cheap. If it's not full, you're too high. Pretty simple.
That works. That works. All right. So you have to manage not only your person, but you also have to manage a position, and a lot of times those are in conflict. But if you manage your person, then a lot of time the position happens. So if you manage yourself, organize yourself, keep your business records accurate, your office space, eventually that position can grow. Your product, you yourself as a caller, and will grow, and you'll be able to achieve success with you in the middle of it. Thank you much. Let's go ahead and we'll have Larry discuss some printing. Box 140.
Thanks, Tim. Call Shirley at 387.
Oh, thank you very much.
My part of the panel this morning is on a couple of things: promotion and advertising, the difference between, and let's start right off with what promotion actually is and the difference between promotion and advertising. Most people, and I've got to compare this to something that we can all relate to real quick, and it has to really do with like beginner classes. Most beginner classes are advertised in this manner in most of the clubs that I see across the country. The president makes an announcement at the dance. Well, in 2 weeks we got classes that are going to start. Don't forget to tell all your friends. And we got an ad in the local magazine, Square Dance Magazine. It's going to do you a whole lot of good right there to promote there for square dancers that you got a beginner class going. It helps let the club members know sometimes. But 2 weeks before or a month before, it says, always say at each one of the club dances, which the club dances twice a month, let's say, so 2 shots. Don't forget to tell your friends and neighbors that we got a beginner class going to start. End of promotion. Doesn't do much good. And we all find out that we say, well, we had 2 couples show up for our beginner class. We've been there. Thought there was a problem with this, and at a younger age, I tried a little marketing project that seemed to work. But I happened to work for a guy that used to be national sales director at PR Mallory. Remember when the dishes in the grocery store, that if you were allowed, if you bought $20 worth of groceries, we allowed you to buy this plate for $1. Made billions. Actually, when they sold that plate to you for $1, the grocery store made about 50 cents on that plate already. But they allowed you to make them that $1 if you bought $20 worth of groceries. Promotion is something that has to get everybody's attention to get on the same bandwagon. Advertising is one leg of promotion. So let's go back and refer back to the beginner class. Use it for a good example. Who would possibly be the salesman for square dancing? Square dancers. It's kind of a little pyramid system that works. Friends get friends that get friends. So when I looked at this, the first thing that I decided I have to do is I have to create me a whole staff of salesmen. And I have to educate them and give them the proper tools they need to go out and do some promotion. First thing you have to do with salesmen is get their attention. Second thing you have to do is arm them with all the advertising literature that they're going to need to go out and promote. Then after you got their attention, you've armed them all up, loaded with advertising products. Now you have to enthuse that salesman to get up off his duff and go promote. That creates the problem. First of all, how do you get everybody together? The best way that I can explain something like this is with an example. In my old hometown, Lafayette, Indiana, square dancing about folded up. Used to have 7 strong, thriving clubs. After several years had gone by, it had dropped down to about 2 clubs that were dancing 3 squares in one club and about 4 in the other. It almost died. My folks gave me a jingle. I was kind of busy on the road. They said, what do you think we can do? Can you help us in any way? So I found some time to go back and do a beginner class. That's the only way you can help us put new people in. First thing to do is get everybody together and let them know what we're going to do. So I contacted the 2 clubs that were in the town and anybody that was concerned and had it announced at several dances for about 3 months that we were going to have a pitch-in dinner and a little meeting concerning beginner classes and those that were interested in preserving square dancing in that town. So we all got out and we had a big social event. We had a big pitch-in dinner. Before that dinner, I was prepared for my salesmen. I had to promote them. I had to arm them with the tools they had to go. So I had the flyers I had little business card handouts that they could hand their friends that told when the class was going to be. I had already reserved the building. I've already set up the callers, my own schedule for the calling of the classes, and other callers when I couldn't be there. Everything was arranged by the time the folks got there. When they got there, I strongly suggested that we do something with beginner classes. And somebody said, well, let's promote a class. Let's start a beginner class and get one going. I said, good idea. Right behind me was all the literature ready to go. The dates were set up. I said, but we need to all do this together. If we're all concerned about square dancing, if you like it, the best thing you can ever do is take another couple back into the activity. So I got them fired up. They were saying, yeah. It's kind of like this came from an Amway meeting, just ready to go. So we didn't sell SA8, but we definitely sold the people the idea that square dancing in that town was going to die if we didn't do something. So we did. After they got all hiked up, I said, now, you have to go back and express the same thing to all the rest of the club members. I want you to take the same hype that we have here, take it back to the club members, and try to instill that in them. See if you can get them excited about it. Well, Myrtle, the class is going to start Tuesday. We better go over. Did you ask our neighbors if they want to go? What excitement. Hey, Myrtle, the class is going to start next Tuesday. We better get over and talk to our neighbors over there and make sure we pick them up and bring them out to the class the first time, make sure they get there. Little difference of promotion and spirit to go get people. Well, needless to say, the class turned out very well. We armed them with literature at the pitch-in dinner. We started our campaign promotion of this class by starting with our salesmen. Every person that was in that hall that day for that pitch-in dinner was salesmen for the class. They were all staff managers because they all had friends and other club members that they were close to that they had to go back and promote them. Again, the pyramid goes on and on and on until it reaches Joe Blow on the street. So they needed all the tools. We had posters for the windows. We had flyers for handouts, for quick handouts so that everybody was armed all the time. Was a little business card stack up that you could keep in your billfold or the ladies in your purse, that when you met somebody and they wanted to talk to them about square dancing, voila, you could hand them a card right then and there. Then we had some other folks that I said, I need to have some demonstrations. We need to put it in the public's eye. We need to see square dancing out in the mall, out in the street somewhere. We need to get busy. One promotional tool was we had somebody said, hey, I know the manager of the mall over there, and we can go over there and do a demo dance in the mall on Saturday afternoon when it's busy. I said, fantastic. Would you chair that? And I'm gonna call you back in a week, and I'll see how you're doing on it. I love for somebody to say, I know something about blah, 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 because I make them the chairman of that quick. Anyway, so they did. And somebody else says, well, I know somebody that owns a dry cleaners, and I know the lady who works over at Mr. Donut. She'll let us put a poster up in the window. So once it's just amazing, a magical thing happens. Once you try to get people promoted, once it starts, they come up with all kinds of ideas that you never thought of. They come up with places you never thought about putting advertising, and it kind of starts snowballing. And if you can get them excited about it, that, hey, we're going to do something. Our dancing around this area is going to die if we don't. The promotion from myself to the dancers that were attending the pitch-in dinner to the ones that from their friends on out made a large network of salesmen. I can't go to a town and sell square dance class all by myself. It takes me a while to build a staff of salesmen that can help me do that. At the same time, while they're recruiting, I'm recruiting also, but I'm also trying to keep them pumped up, keep them informed, keep them full of those tools that they need to go out and advertise. Needless to say, the class, we ran classes for about 3 years. We'd run a short version, then it was back-to-back classes, and we'd run a short version, then we'd take them to the next 2-hour program, and another bunch would come in. We kind of all kept running those, flip-flopping, end over end for about 3 years, and we put about 35 new squares in that town, and it's still surviving. Square dancing's at its best there. In advertising, as far as printing goods, a couple of years ago, I put together a printing company in McAllen, Texas. Learned a lot from putting that together myself, from practical experience and on-hand experience, learn as you do. A lot of folks look at flyers, and I have seen some of the gorgeous-looking flyers and I've seen some of the trashiest looking things go through my own shop. If a flyer that you put together, if you can't tell at a glance of what's going on, it's no good. Remember, the word flyer came from back during the war, I believe it was, when they used to drop them out of an airplane, pieces of paper that would fly all over the cities and let them know what's going on. That meant that at a glance, it's kind of like the front page headlines. So many times we're trying to say, well, we got to make sure that we tell that, Ethel furnished the coffee and donation's going to be this, and it's going to be purple ribbons that you must wear in your hair for that night because it's a purple dance. And we've got all this stuff on, just stuff that don't really need to be on the front page of the flyer. If you have a lot of details, use a two-sided flyer. The front page should say who, what, when, and where, and not much more. Hello. In the printing business, to choose your printer. There's always one in McAllen. No. When you go to your hometown looking for printing, the best way to find a printer is if you find a chain. Now this is from my experience, it's a personal opinion that I see. If you find a chain of printers, usually they've got a lot of extra costs on there. There's franchise fees, percentages that they have to pay each month. So obviously when they print something, they got to tack all this on. If you'll look for private owned, and look for the guy that's not on Main Street. Most areas, printers are a dime a dozen. They're all over, up and down the streets. If you'll find the guy that's on the side street, one of his biggest expenses in the printing business is his overhead, which happens to deal with the building. If he's on Main Street or he's at the mall, he's got an extremely high overhead. If he's over here on a side street somewhere, and don't judge a book by its cover. If a printing company is very neat and orderly when you walk in there, they're not doing much business. Last time I walked through my printing company, I had to jump over, walk over, move around this, and I could tell right away without even asking, we're doing some business, aren't we? The quick prints, they're the printer you want to go to. If you're looking at folks that do full color type work, usually you're talking about large volume of printing of 100,000 or 250,000 or 500,000 copies of something that when they run them in that large volume, the price does come down. But they really can't afford to go in there and do 500 full color brochures. If you've ever bought 500 full color brochures, you paid out the nose for those. In printing, some of the quickest and easiest and most inexpensive ways of advertising and flyers, home computers nowadays. Man, what a thing that happened from old days of setting lead type, edit writer type machines. Now you can do it all on a TV screen. A couple things that you have to remember about when using home computers is your printer. If you use your printer a lot, make sure you put in a new ribbon right before you do this, because you need a solid black copy. When they go to print material at a printing company, if the original is kind of faded, every copy will be faded. You only print what you see. In good printing, you'll find that a lot of folks go to a lot of extravagant ideas. I brought a couple examples, but I really don't even need to pass these out. You've all seen the ones that look nice and neat. You've seen the ones that look kind of cluttered. I'm going to lay some examples down on the foot of the stage towards the end of the session if you'd like to review. And it's kind of, I have the before and after look. What came in before, how our composition department kind of rearranged it, laid it out so it was easier to the eyes to read. And you can see the difference in the two. When you go to a printer, look for 20-pound paper. 20-pound bond paper is normal tablet paper, computer paper. Most of the time, the cost of white paper to color paper is not that big a difference. In some printing companies, they just charge the same price for white or colors all the way through a 20-pound bond. If you have something you say, I've got a two-sided flyer and I don't want to see through the flyer so it shows in the back, go to a colored paper. Don't necessarily go to like a 60-pound paper. When you're reaching heavier bonds of paper, the price goes up tremendous. Sometimes it's just cheaper to go to a colored. Inks. If you can use black ink, use it. Every printer has a rule. He always has one press and black ink, because 99% of the stuff you do is in a black text. Color inks. Color inks can range from anywhere of charging you $15 to $40 higher just to change a color. That's to print exactly what you've got, and different than black. If you just want it red, red is a good color. It stands out. They'll charge you from $15 to $40 just to make that color. Make sure that's worth it in your promotion campaign. In two colors, if you're going to use a multi-color flyer, remember most of the time on quick print presses, they have to go back through a second time. Each piece of paper is fed through the press, and they put on one color. Then they have to stop and they clean it up, and they put it on again. They put another color on there, and they put all the papers back through, and they're sending them right back through. So they charge you for the second run. A lot of times they charge you for a second plate that they have to shoot for a color separation. So again, the cheapest way or most economic way is black ink. A couple different things I want to say on type styles. If you like to use extravagant type styles, something fancier, look for making your logo of your event. For example, on the beginner class, we designed kind of like a logo that was telling exactly what we were doing with square dancing. We used some fancy typesetting for this to make it stand out. But now the rest of it was in pretty much block letter, or what we call text lettering. And here's a word that you all need to write down or remember when you go to your printer. It's called Helvetica. Is a particular book text type style. That way, if your printer closes its doors, moves on, and you got to go down the street to the next printer, he'll have it. There's another word called Helios. Helios and Helvetica is the same type styles with very minute differences. You couldn't tell them unless you're really a type expert. If the printer that you use, if you can take camera-ready work, and what we mean by camera-ready work is you could take that flyer that you have, put it on a copy machine, and shoot a copy of it, and maybe you'd have a few paste-up lines. Don't worry about those, because he can etch those out. But you've got it the way that you want it. If you can put it on a copy machine, shoot a copy of it, it looks good to you, and that's the way you want it. That's the best way to take it to your printer. If not, he's going to start charging you for layout, design, and it could end up extremely high. Computers have helped out by saving a lot of money on typesetting. Typesetting runs, usually folks charge from anywhere from $10 from a minimal changes or minimal typesetting, up to $50 or $60 per page, depending on how much his work is there. Typesetters are paid by the hour and not by the job. So when they do something, maybe a page of text takes them 15 minutes to do, but they usually make around $75 to $100 an hour. So remember, when you put your flyers, if you have it typeset, ask for Helios or Helvetica so that you can change if something comes back. Here's a little trick that I learned in the printing business that I'm going to pass on. You probably won't find too many printers to tell you about this. How many of you ever had your Christmas flyer and it was on a red paper or a green paper, black ink, and you took it in and you said, we just like to do the same thing and all we want to do is change the date and print up 500 more. And the guy says, well, we'll have to retypeset it. Because you put it on a copy machine, you take a photograph of it, it's all black. How many's done that? How many's paid? Anybody? Good night. They'll tell you they have to retypeset this. That's a lie. There's a trick. If you've got a colored paper and it's been printed, now this won't work out of a copy machine, and it's been printed, and instead of paying additional $25 or $30 for new typesetting, you can pay the minimal for like $10 or $8 for the type changes, changing the date, maybe the location, whatever changes you had. But basically you want the same thing. Take this piece of paper that's printed already, your flyer from last year, get you a pan. Take Clorox bleach. Put the flyer in the pan, pour the Clorox bleach on the flyer. The ink will not dissolve. It'll stay put. The paper dye that's in the colored paper will fade out. And it returns back to natural color paper, about the color of a grocery sack. With that flyer wet, you can put that on a copy machine, take a photocopy of it, and you're back to black and white. Which typesetting you have. Proofreading. Let's say, well, I don't have it all put together yet, and I need to go and have this typeset, and they're going to charge me $4 million to do this, and I got to have 5,000 flyers, and blah, blah, blah. Now, you've got it what you think is camera ready, or the first initial layout. Let's say we're not camera ready. We don't have a thing. All we've got is a piece of paper. Sit down with a piece of paper and just kind of informally make a flyer how you want yours to look. Be a little creative. When you're done with this, take it to your printer. You can take it to a wholesale or a retail typesetting company if you have. Usually you might save a few bucks, but you've got to go take it over there, proof it, pick it up, take it to a printer. Printer usually, if he works, has in-house typesetting, or he uses an outside typesetting service. Usually they're receiving somewhere between 20-30% discount on typesetting. So when they receive that 20-30% discount, they're additionally going to mark up 20-25% when they take it back. That's why the home computers with PageMaker, Workshop, a lot of these software programs they got now to design a flyer is the best bet. Don't use a typewriter. That's very unprofessional. If you've ever looked at flyers with typewriters, it just doesn't come out right. The typewriter just doesn't. The IBM ball type typewriter seems to, if you got to do it, that seems to be the best one to use. Laser printers now have taken the place of the typewriters. You can get laser printers, or you can get, what do they call them, dot matrix? Dot matrix. As long as you have a nice new ribbon in there and it makes it solid black, because when you take that to the printer, it's going to have to look mighty dark. Putting pictures on your flyers. Good idea. If you want somebody to recognize that you're doing the dance, put your picture on there. Lets them know in a heartbeat. Says a lot of words with that one picture. But pictures sometimes can be costly. Promotional photos. For business cards, I put my picture on the back of my business card. Some say I'm so vain, that's what I need to do. Not necessarily so. How many times have people ever said, hey, send me a picture for that dance we're going to do. We're going to make you some flyers. And they told you like in between a tip. You went home that night and forgot all about it. What I do at that time is I reach into my briefcase and I pull out one of my business cards. And I said, here, there's a picture on the back of this. Just in case. That picture on the back is not going to turn out as well as a new black and white glossy picture that's been half-toned or screened. But it will serve a purpose if you forget to do it. Pictures that you take for promotional type use or have taken, always use a black and white glossy. Always use a white background, a light background, and your picture will come out much better when it comes to a printer. In printing, there's some technical things. It's called line screening. Actually, what line screen means is how many dots per inch, per square inch, do they do on this picture. A picture can't be printed in a big solid like that. It has to be broken up into a dot pattern so that it can be printed. Most quick printers use what we call 85 line screen. There's 85 dots per square inch. Some of your higher quality printers, commercial printers, they get into 110. Newspaper is usually pretty rough. When you go to a newspaper press, usually they're looking at 65 line screen, and you notice that pictures on some of the newspapers, they look kind of shallow. If you stand back from them, they look better. It's because of the dots. There's not as many dots in the picture. The reasoning for the light background is you show up much better. If you put yourself on a dark background, you tend to blend in with everything that's in behind you. There's some pictures on a flyer down here that I'll lay down here at the foot of the table of several callers that are going on a cruise. Look at the difference in the pictures. The one that has the dark background compared to the person that has light background behind their head. And these are just mug shots, so you can sure tell the difference. The ones that have the lighter background do stand out much better. Don't forget, when you go to do your promotion with all your flyers, Don't forget to go back and get your salesman excited. You are the leader. You're the head honcho that's going to be there for the event that you're going to do. Don't rely on your clubs to come up with all the spunk or all the enthusiasm to do your promotion. It's your class. You're the leader of the club. Sometimes you'll get an officer that has had some sales background, promotional type advertising background. Your job's easy, then you don't have to do as much. But help them. But be the one that gets them excited about promoting. And I think that's going to be your best way of advertising. I'll take any questions now. If not, I'll pass the mic on to Greg. No questions? I thought he was headed for the mic. Okay, here's Greg.
Thank you, Larry and Tim. We've got quite a bit of material to cover. We've got a handout that I believe we've got some helpers who are going to hand out this outline, so if we get our helpers organized there. This is a 3-page outline for purposes of those folks who have purchased this tape from CALLERLAB and are not here at this session or are listening to this at a later date. If you would like a copy of this outline, send a stamped return envelope to the CALLERLAB office in Rochester, Minnesota, and George White will have those outlines that can be sent to you. This 3-page outline is quite detailed. I have made the outline more detailed than I might otherwise do because we will not be able to cover everything in this tax area that is included on the outline. We will cover as many items as we can in the time allotted. Some items we will gloss over and just mention so that you will be aware that they do exist as potential problem areas. Some of the areas are technical in nature, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on them because they may not be really that much of a concern for you as a square dance caller and a caller's partner. But they are there to hopefully generate some questions in your mind either at the end of this session or when you get back home as you analyze your particular situation. Perhaps something in this outline of a detailed nature will be something that you can go to the person who prepares your tax return and get further clarification to find out if indeed it is something that you need to be concerned with. As another preparatory remark that I'd like to make is kind of a disclaimer in a way. I am not a CPA. As Karen mentioned in the introduction, I do have a bachelor's degree in accounting. I've spent all my years since college doing accounting work. The first 7 years was doing tax work for a corporation. But I do not regard myself as an expert in taxes. I've gotten a good background in it. I am more current on certain issues than I was 2 months ago because I've been doing a lot of reading lately, trying to find out the areas that have created changes in the tax law in the last couple of years so that I could hopefully be prepared to address some of the areas that are of interest to you today. So with that said, I believe most of the outlines have been handed out. If you do need an outline and you haven't received it yet, please raise your hand and I'm sure the assistants will get those handed out to you. As I said, 3-page outline. The first thing, and this was the area of hobby or business, and it's an area that Tim alluded to in his opening remarks. And the question of a hobby or business, there's a whole section of tax law that deals with that area. The IRS has established various criteria over the years to make a determination as to whether the particular activity that you are engaged in is a hobby or a business. If it is determined that it is a hobby, if you are audited and it's determined to be a hobby, you cannot deduct a loss, period. You can report revenue. In fact, you must report the revenue. You can deduct expenses up to the amount of the revenue, but you cannot deduct the loss. If, however, it is not a hobby, if it's been determined that it is a business, you can then deduct the losses up to a point. In the outline, we've got a title under hobby or business that says business, the presumption of profit motive. Presumption of profit motive is Internal Revenue Service language that indicates that they will focus on your particular business and say, we will presume that there is an intent to make a profit if, in fact, in 3 out of the past 5 years you have made a profit. If you fail that test, if you have filed a Schedule C and have not shown a profit in 3 out of the last 5 years, then they go to the next stage, which is a list of factors that they review to determine if you are really in this as a business and not a hobby. And I have listed these. I'll read them for the purposes of the tape, and then we'll comment on some of them. Accurate books and records. that Tim spoke about earlier. Expertise of the taxpayer, in this case, expertise as a caller. Time and effort expended in the activity. History of losses after the startup period. In other words, you started a few years ago. What was your history of losses? Were they quite large? Were they small, etc.? An amount of an occasional profit. If during the last 5 years the profits you had were very small compared to the losses, that would have negative impact upon you if you went through an audit. Primary source of income. In the case of the gentleman to my right, it is their primary source of income. No doubt about it. It's their business. For someone like me who has a full-time job as an accountant, it is not the primary source of income. That could conceivably be a negative aspect against me. Not that it would, because all these other factors would be considered also. Elements of personal pleasure. I don't really understand that one. As I read the text in the committee reports and the Senate, etc., it made it sound like if you enjoyed your work, then it must be a hobby. And I don't think I'm reading that right, because it does not make sense, but then a lot of tax law does not make sense. Moving along into the area of equipment. There's more than one method of deducting the cost of your equipment. You can expense it in the year, and that's referred as a Section 179. When I say section in any of these, I'm referring to the Internal Revenue Code revenue section of the code. A Code 179 deduction means you can deduct, you buy an amplifier, you can deduct that cost in 1 year. I doubt that many callers do that unless they're high revenue, high turnover of equipment, because it increases expense, obviously, lowers net income, conceivably would cause a problem in the hobby loss rule area. Depreciation is much more common. Depreciation is nothing more as a concept than spreading the cost of that piece of equipment over a certain number of years. 5 years is the standard for electronic equipment generally, and that would be what we as callers would use, a 5-year period to depreciate. The next section of the outline, and we will come back to this in questions if we need to, but I am going to skim over it. Depreciation methods that can be used. The first two, ACRS, that stands for Accelerated Cost Recovery System. That was an amendment to the tax code for equipment acquired before 1987, and it was depreciated over a 5-year period. Item 2, MACRS, MECRS, Modified Accelerated Cost Recovery for equipment acquired after 1986. It had higher write-offs in the earlier years, and then the write-offs would go down after that. Or straight line, which is an optional method. Even though you bought a piece of equipment after 1986, normal method IRS is MECRS. You may, however, elect straight line, which is what I have used. When you elect straight line, that is an irrevocable election. That just means that once you, the first year, decide to depreciate straight line, you can't change your mind. You have made an election. Again, as we go through, if these thoughts are triggering questions in your mind, jot down a note on your outline, and I'd be more than happy to take questions at the end. But I don't want to spend a lot of time on technical areas that may be something that you're going to have your tax accountant worry about rather than doing it yourself. When you hear terminology about half-year convention, that merely means that even though the asset has a 5-year life, you're only going to take a half year's depreciation in that first year. And then 4 full years of depreciation under whatever system you're using, and then a half year on the tail end. So you end up stretching over a 6-year period. But that's a technical matter that your accountant would probably take care of for you. Computers. We talked a little bit about computers, and Larry referred to using computers in advertising. Many areas that you would use computers for. The deductibility of computers can be a gray area depending upon its use. If you are definitely a business and the computer is used solely for business, there probably will not be a problem. If you are a hobby, using the computer both for business and hobby, there could be a problem. And that is where we come up with the thought of a contemporaneous log. That is nothing more than a record which can be kept on the computer of when do I use the computer for business, when do I use it for personal. Keeping that log then would indicate what percent is used business, what percent personal, and therefore what percent of the depreciation and or expenses associated with the computer am I allowed to deduct on my tax return as a caller. The whole area of deducting computers, there has been, as near as I can tell, a lack of court cases dealing with self-employed individuals. So it's a little hard to tell in the case of a self-employed individual how the IRS is going to treat that. The next page of the outline, we get into the area of automobile costs. Basically two methods of how to deduct expenses for automobile costs. And for many of us, that is going to be a significant deduction on our Schedule C in our tax return. Standard mileage rate is the easiest. The rates have changed year after year, and I've listed these. The most current one for this past year, if you've not filed your return yet for 1990, 26 cents per mile for all miles. I'll come back to what I mean by all miles in just a moment. This current year of 1991, 27.5 cents per mile for all miles. So the diary that Tim was talking about that is used to record all sorts of information, including mileage, becomes a source document for claiming automobile expense. If you don't want to keep all of the receipts that Tim talked about, you can deduct the cost for your automobile at 27.5 cents a mile. But if you have kept records of vehicles in the past, you are very well aware that 27.5 cents a mile probably is not coming close to covering your expenses. So that's where using actual cost comes in. Actual cost is going to include depreciation of the vehicle. It's going to include oil, repairs, tires, insurance, license plates, etc. All of those costs that you can think of that go along with operating your vehicle to the extent they are used for business purposes, and again, that's where the diary comes in. Total mileage for the year per your diary, you've added it up, X thousands of miles. Total business mileage that you've written down, another number. That percent, 60%, 40%, 80%, whatever, that is the percent of your business expense if you are keeping track of actual costs. So the record keeping that Tim talked about is extremely important in that area to be able to keep track of these things. Now, there is, in some cases, open to interpretation as to what is deductible and what is not. There was one amusing note that I read several years ago, and I clipped it out and kept it in my file because it had to do with automobiles indirectly, but also with this matter of interpretation. This fellow got a $35 speeding ticket. And to make it worse, he'd get no tax benefit for the expenditure, fines or penalties being non-deductible as they are. He told the story to a couple of his clients, and they nearly died laughing, so he deducted it as entertainment expense. Don't do it. There's some other areas. They are noted on your outline. We've talked about in the outline, again, ACRS, MACRS, and straight line as being different methods of depreciation, when to use them, when not to use them. If you have questions on that at the end, I'll be happy to take the questions. Also, you need to be cautioned that if you've got a vehicle that you've used for business purposes, when you go to sell that vehicle, you may have to take into account gain or loss on that vehicle in adjusting the basis, the net cost, the depreciable cost of your new vehicle, because you have received a tax benefit from your old vehicle. So you can't sell it for X dollars and totally ignore that transaction, or you can't trade it in for the new vehicle and totally ignore the effect of that trade-in. So that's an area to be aware of. Meals and entertainment expenses are deductible under certain conditions. The IRS has an overnight sleep rule. For a traveling caller like Tim and Larry, no problem. They're away from home on the road, the meal expenses are deductible. For someone who goes to call a dance in a town 70, 80, 90 miles away, returns home the same night, even though he left early, bought a meal, not deductible. You go to do a 2-day festival, you drive, you stay overnight, all the meals on that trip are deductible. You drive to a town, you do a dance, it's a long way away, you drive partway home, you pull over at a roadside park, you sleep for a few hours, you wake up, you drive home, meals not deductible. That does not qualify as the overnight sleep rule. So whether or not they're deductible is basically hinged around that overnight sleep rule. In the past few years, as a result of the Tax Reform Act of 1986, only part of our meals were deductible. 80% of meals are deductible. So first you decide, is it a deductible meal? Once that answer is yes, then only 80% of that cost is deductible. On the right-hand side, lower half of the Schedule C, there is a section where you will show travel and entertainment expenses, and then there's a separate line to record meals and then you take 80% of that as being the deductible expense. For CALLERLAB conventions, part of the fee that you paid is for meals. I talked to John Kay, and for both this convention and the last year's convention in Orlando, $110 per person of the cost of your convention package was for meals. $110 per person was meals. Therefore, only 80% of that $110 is a deductible expense on the tax return. There was a transition period in years prior to 90 where even though it was enacted by the tax reform law, we could still deduct 100% of the convention fee that went to meals. We no longer can do that. There's something on your outline referred to as M&IE per diem allowance. M&IE is an IRS term that's an abbreviation for meals and incidental expense allowance, or per diem allowance. There was a new revenue procedure that came out in 1990 that addressed that issue. For a full-time caller, for example, traveling on the road, if he does not want to keep receipts for meals, he may deduct an amount per day for the standard cost of meals and incidental expenses. There is a list which I have of different areas of the country that are either high cost or normal cost. Different cities fall into different categories. If you are deducting, and again, number one, it's got to be an overnight sleep rule. You've got to satisfy that first. But if you want to deduct for a full day's meals, normally $26 per day for meals and incidental expenses. $26 a day. For a high-cost area, what's a high-cost area? Consult a list. $34 per day. If you are only away part of the day, it must be prorated in force. Divide the 24-hour clock into 6-hour increments. Whatever meal would normally fall into that increment, that's the pro rata portion that's deductible. For an office in the home, very touchy area. There's a question on the Schedule C. Did you deduct expenses of an office in the home? You check that, it increases your chances of being audited. The criteria for determining whether or not you have an office in the home. Exclusive use of a room or a part of a room and used on a regular basis. Two very important words, exclusive and regular. If you have a den set up that you not only use for calling business, but you use for other personal activities, if you've got your personal library of books in there, if you read in there, etc., that doesn't fall into it doesn't meet the requirements of exclusive use. Used on a regular basis, that probably would be an easier part of the law to meet the requirements of. But they will look at that. Normally, they would take the percent of the square footage. But again, if you have thoughts of deducting home office, there, I believe, is an IRS publication that you can get that details many of the rules for how to calculate square footage, which costs are deductible, etc. If you are going to deduct the expenses of a home office deduction are limited by the gross income of the square dance calling. In other words, you cannot have a loss created because of deducting home office expenses. I have listed on the outline the order with which you deduct the various expenses. I won't go into those right now unless there's a question later. On the next page of our outline, I've just listed some of the normal type of expenditures, and maybe I would presume most people have thought of these, but perhaps you have not. The deductions that you would claim on your Schedule C for the business of square dance calling. Repairs to equipment, recordings and recording supplies, cassette tapes, etc. Airfare, dues and publications, caller run club expenditures. Some callers like to keep a separate section of their record keeping. If they have a caller run club, they like to keep a separate section in the record keeping for the expenses associated with this caller run club, whether it be advertising, refreshment supplies, refreshments, whatever the expenses are. Telephone. There have been some changes in the last few years on telephone expenses. Long distance calls plus the tax associated with them, no problem. I make notations on my phone bill when I get it each month. I make notations in my calendar because by the time I get the phone bill, I've forgotten who in blazes did I talk to in Podunk. So I make a notation on my calendar. When I get the phone bill, I can reference back to my calendar, and then I make a notation on the phone bill as to who I talked to. So I can then easily total up what the deductible long-distance phone calls are. The basic local service for one line coming into a home is not deductible for business. For many years, I deducted half of the cost of my telephone line coming into the house because I figured of the times that I was using the phone, about half of it was for business. You can no longer do that. If you have a second telephone line for your business only, then that would probably be deductible. If you have some enhancements to your phone service, such as call waiting, call forwarding, that may be deductible depending upon the circumstances of your particular case. But one line coming into the house, that basic cost of service, not deductible. Costumes. The area of costumes, if it is not adaptable to general wear, it will probably be deductible. Ladies have it easier in this area than men probably do from a theoretical IRS viewpoint because of the square dance fashions and the petticoats, etc., as opposed to a western shirt, a pair of boots, etc. Just because it's expensive, a pair of lizard boots or some other exotic boot, just because it's expensive, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will be deductible. I do deduct my western clothes and the other costumes, but I also don't wear them much outside the square dance activity. Whether or not that would help me in an audit with the IRS, I don't really know. Records retention. Tim talked about the kinds of records you keep. How long do you keep them? Generally, 3 years from the date the return was filed or was due to be filed is a sufficient length of time to keep the detailed records, the receipts, and hopefully you're keeping them in an organized manner like Tim described, so that you can file them away and still access them several years later, not just in the current year that you're working on your tax return for. If the IRS found out that you underreported your gross income by at least 25%, then you are required to have kept your records for 6 years. So if they could prove that you underreported your income, that extends the period of time that they can go back and look at your records. If there is suspected fraud, that would not apply. Obviously, we're all honest, one should hope. Any kind of record keeping that you have relating to calculations of basis of an asset or its replacement, for example, an automobile. How much did the automobile cost? How much did the amplifier cost? How much did the wireless microphone cost? Keep those records for as long as you have that asset or its replacement. You bought a car 5 years ago. You're going to buy a new car this year. You're trading in the old car. You end up adjusting the basis of the new car for depreciation purposes. So you still need to keep the records of the old car because it has a direct bearing on the purchase of the new car. So you need to keep the records of the old car for as long as you have the new car. So there are some variations in how long you keep the records depending upon what the nature of the expense is. Self-employment taxes. There's a Schedule SE that goes with the Form 1040. You are required to pay self-employment tax, which is a self-employed substitute for FICA tax, if your net income from square dance calling exceeds $400, and if you did not have another job which you maxed out on the FICA limit. Current FICA limit, at least for 1990, I believe, was $51,300. So if you did not have a job that paid you that amount and therefore did not max out, and you did earn more than $400 square dance calling net, you would have to pay tax. The form has a step rate schedule. I've listed for what the rule was in 1989 and what it is in 1990. 1990, you get a little bit of credit on the amount of the tax. I won't go through the computation, but it is a pretty hefty chunk of change. You're talking approximately 15%, 13% of your net calling income. That is in addition to the state and federal income tax that you're going to pay on the same net income. So by the time you add the self-employment tax to the income tax, you're paying a fair hunk of change every time you make that additional dollar as a square dance caller. You walk into the hall, you've already covered all your expenses, but every dollar you make, you're going to pay out about, conceivably, 40% or whatever, depending on what your state tax rates are, of that dollar in total income and self-employment taxes. So it is a major consideration. Estimated tax payments. If you do not have a full-time job that is having withholding being taken out, you may have to pay quarterly estimated tax payments, and there are some rules on the outline for that. KEO plan, retirement plan, I mentioned that. It is perhaps not used by a lot of callers, but it is a way that you can take net square dance income and put some of it away in a tax-sheltered investment for use at a later time. to help along with your retirement. Now, as I said, I purposely went through that rather rapidly, but we do have times for questions. If you have questions, please step to one of the two microphones. There's one toward the back middle. There's one up here in front. If you have questions, we do want to get the questions on tape for the benefit of those who do buy the tape, and we would like to have just a few moments of questions, and then we adjourn for lunch. Any questions? Step to the microphone, please, if you do. In the front here, please.
I have a comment. I'm a retired tax auditor for the state of California, and so I had some comments to make in regard to your hobby or loss.
Yes, ma'am.
Your presumption there. Wanted to comment that the actual profit in the 3 of 5 years, that puts the burden of proof on the IRS to show that you are a hobby. The presumption with profit 3 out of 5 years is that you are a business. If you don't have, then the presumption is on you to show that you are a business. You referred to the elements of personal pleasure. If you had perhaps a gold mining operation where you were going out sweating and digging, not considered personal pleasure. But when I watch my husband when he's calling, I think he's having personal pleasure. Also might comment, there's one other factor there that might help you if you are having losses and still want to continue to deduct. And that would be if you're losing money, keep changing what you're doing to try and make that effort to make money. That would be one way that you could show that it is a business when you're changing your mode of operation.
Excellent point.
Last thing, in regard to the general record keeping, you mentioned here 3 years from the date of the return file. I know the state of California can audit for 4 years, and I would assume most states would be able to audit for 1 additional year. So you might want to keep those records for 1 additional year because your state normally has the option to come in and follow up the IRS 1 year later.
Thanks for sharing those insights with us. Let's go to the back microphone, then we'll come back to the front.
Okay, my question concerns the qualification for meals on an overnight stay. For a caller that generally travels in a motorhome and may stay overnight in the motorhome and not have any proof of a campground receipt or anything like that, how does the IRS look upon this?
If we're talking just meal expense and it was indeed a valid overnight stay, if you want to go to the bother of keeping track of how much the can of chili and a container of beans, etc. cost.
No, you slept in the motorhome and you ate your meals out.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I
do this on a regular basis, and I may stay overnight in my motorhome, eat all my meals out, and
that's fine. Where you slept overnight is not pertinent in determining the fact qualifying for the overnight sleep rule. So that is, you could deduct the expenses of the meals that you ate out as long as you had the overnight sleep rule satisfied, whether it be in a motorhome or a motel.
Yeah, but they aren't looking for any type of proof other than, say, mileage of 300 miles, something like that? Yeah, away from home.
It would not hurt in your diary, I think, the fact that you're not going to have a receipt because you used your motorhome. I would think you would want to note in your diary that you stayed overnight and name the town, the campground, or whatever.
Thank you.
Up front here, please.
We were talking in terms of expense deductions. Are we also talking about partner and caller deductions?
Absolutely. When I file my Schedule C, the name on the business is Gregg and Carol Anderson. It is a partnership.
Okay, that's one thing I want to know. Another thing I wanted to know was in terms of activity. For instance, this may not relate to our general conversation over here, but we talk about caller participation. Now, for instance, if sometimes I go up to Kirkwood Lodge, and I go up there, say I'm going up there in terms of going for recreation and so forth on my part, but also knowing that the fact that maybe I can call there, while Larry's there at the same time, and to a degree, is there anything that, if possible, that I could deduct in that respect? For caller participation, but maybe it's even from one night, for instance, I go to a place sometimes over a weekend, and they allow the callers to call, and I feel that this is a.
Let me cut you short. I understand the question. That's educational expense. I would keep track either in your diary or other records of things, reasons you went there, things you picked up, information you picked up. If they had a program listed for what the weekend's activities were, keep that in your file. But if you got an opportunity to call on the program, that's a form of advertising. So the attendance at this convention, there are many educational elements associated with it. Attendance at a weekend like you may be talking about, many educational elements involved with it, definitely deductible.
Okay.
If you make a side trip to do sightseeing and those sightseeing costs are extra, they are not deductible.
Okay, all right, that's what I want to know.
Question in the back, please.
Ellen Cole, Indiana. You said you would come back to the comment of taking all your mileage. How's
Oh,
that?
yes, I'm sorry, I didn't come back to that. There used to be a limitation when you took the standard mileage deduction that you could only deduct that standard mileage rate for the first 15,000 miles in the year. For any miles beyond the 15,000 miles, it dropped to a lower rate. I believe it was 11 cents per mile. When they changed the law, they said that whatever the mileage rate is, it is deductible for all miles in the year. So if you have 20, 30, whatever thousand miles, that expense is deductible for the entire amount of mileage, business mileage for the year. Thanks for calling our attention to that.
I am a caller's partner, and I am not married to him. I do have expenses for my clothes, and there are other things that I derive from his calling that spouses would, but I cannot put my expenses on my income taxes for my clothing and that such thing. Is there something that I could do, or that can he claim these clothes?
Nothing you can do. If he's paying your expenses, I would think it would be a valid expense for him. I'm not sure. But nothing you can do on your return.
Is there a particular publication I could get? Tell me.
I honestly don't know.
Ernie Stone, the CPA, sent me up there.
Ernie, do you know, is there a publication? Check the 1-800 number IRS, anonymous phone call asking for information.
Anonymous? Okay.
You bet.
Thank you.
Hello, I am Connie Sipe from Northern California, and I just had the question on a partner's overnight stay. The meals are deductible. How about the caller's overnight stay is deductible. Would the partner's overnight stay meals be deductible also?
In my opinion, yes, because of the joint nature of the partnership for the activity. There has been case law in the corporate world where spouses go along to conventions and do not participate, and that is most decidedly a non-deductible area. Keep outlines of programs for CALLERLAB conventions. CALLERLAB, I think, is one of the better convention packages as far as spousal involvement. And those meetings that Karen Ripito and her committee has set up and other sessions, inter-sessions that you have, that kind of documentation is very much a proof of the importance of the spouse at a convention, and therefore substantiates the deductibility of her expense, not only for a convention, but for a square dance festival, etc.
Thank you.
Charles Hanson, Chattanooga, Tennessee. If you are filing a Schedule C and this is a second business, you have another source of income, and you are using part of your house as for business, if you don't itemize deductions on your 1040, can you still itemize the business tax and that as a loss on your Schedule C?
You may deduct, if indeed it's a valid home office, you may deduct a portion of the expenses of that home associated with that square footage for the home office, but you must follow, there are some and you would want the IRS publication on this, because the degree that you can deduct these and the order in which you deduct them, you take certain expenses and deduct them in this order. So I would advise you to get the detailed literature, but the answer to the question is yes, as far as which ones in what order is in published IRS literature.
Even if you do not itemize deductions?
Even if you do not itemize deductions. Well, I want to thank you all for coming on the behalf of Tim and Larry and myself. We hope you got something out of this.